Hey everyone, Tim Higgins here. So it's been a while since I've done a Nolio video, so I thought I would do one. I have a customer that has a need and we're doing some training. So I thought I would actually share these videos or create these videos for this training to help this customer get moving further and moving along. So what we're going to do is we're going to start a project from scratch and we're using Nolio. So let's pull up our handy dandy notebook because if you know me, I always say start with a notepad. Or your version of a notepad. So what we need to do is we're going to create a website. And with that website, we're going to have a backend. Okay. And now I'm kind of using a new microphone and it's very sensitive. So if you hear things going on, I apologize about that. I'll do my best to cut it out of it. But one of my pet peeves is hearing people type. So I'm going to try not to do that so much. And one of the secrets is too, is put a book underneath your microphone if it's a desk microphone. I do have a sling arm, a boom, but I just don't feel like pulling it out. So now with we're going to create a website. This is just a simple Python website. And we need to deploy it for developers to work on. Now, in the deployment, we need to create some mock data. Okay. And what we need to do is also check that data for PII. Now, mock data by definition doesn't have PII, but we're going to sound like we're pulling it from other sources. Therefore, it might. Now, with saying that, what we're going to do is we're going to use a couple of tools. We're going to use, obviously, Nolio, and we're also going to use TDM. So I'm going to show you how to use TDM. Now, with saying that, what we're going to do is not use it to its full capacity because this is not what the video is about. But we're gonna kind of move through the steps. Now, I'm trying to make this video very long, but unfortunately, it's probably going to be at least an hour. Maybe we can cut it back. And I'm going to do some quick videos to help you learn things, but this isn't one of those. Now, one of these things to think about is Nolio has many different names. There's Nolio, there's Release Automation. You might hear the term CARA, C-A-R-A. There's also the NAS and the TAS. No, I'm sorry, different product. There's also the NAC and the NAS. They're more about architectural type things, servers and that type of stuff. So if you hear me kind of throw that term around, just ignore it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you the foundation first. Okay, so we can delete this one. Unfortunately, I did a lot with batch scripts. It just makes it easier. One thing to think about release automation is one good thing about Broadcom is a lot of the names, and it's probably just not Broadcom, but we support Broadcom the most. In fact, it's probably the only thing we support. Now, whenever you think about, like I tell people, when you think about APM, application performance monitoring, and not to get confused because what you do with it is in the name. It's an application monitoring. Okay, so you think about applications, not infrastructure as much. Same thing with Nolio. There's two words in Nolio that really make sense. One of them is called release. So I care about my releases. And the other one is automation. So we want to focus on both of those today. So the one thing to think about is over here, I created a lot of scripts. I'll tell you some of the things that I had problems with. I'm just setting this up real quick. And a couple of things that I didn't like and did like about using Nolio to do this for me. So we're going to go through the environment. And then we'll go from there. So the first thing is we have this main Python. It's not rocket science. It's just a hello world type application. And I don't care if you see my passwords or anything because this is all local host. It will be blown away. But we do a database connection. And notice it's local host, so it's not a big deal. And what we're doing is we're selecting all from persons. Now, I didn't name it persons. If you see any of my TDM videos, we are actually, now this is Microsoft SQL. I just like the black look, so don't get confused. We're using a database that came with TDM called orders_e. And I'm guessing they named everything singular because entities, but entities in a database want to be plural. So they just put it as some places where they shouldn't, like persons, it should be people. It's one of my pet peeves. But this is what we have in the database. So what we want to do is we want to wipe this out. And then we want to put our own data in there. But let me show you how some of this works so you can understand where we're going with this. Now, let's see. Let's just close all this. Let's open up a command line. Do I have one open already? Nope. That's surprising. I usually do. So let's just go into our folder. Now, the truth is at the end of this, we could stick all this in an artifact. I'll do a short video on how to use artifacts later. In fact, I hopefully get that done today or tomorrow. because that's a very important one to use. The problem with artifacts is it gets really tricky when you're doing automation with it through the APIs. We'll talk about that later. So where am I? Let's clear this. Is it CLS? Yep. So this is DOS, so it'll be DIR. The first thing we want to do is let's clear out our database first, just so we can see what we're doing. Okay, we'll just say delete. And actually run both, it's not important. And if I run this one again, there's nothing there. Okay, cool. So what we need to do is we want to publish some data. Okay, so let's do that. Now, the one thing that I'm going to talk about when we do it is the script is already done, but the database is not done, right? Our TDM is not done. So if I go, and by the way, we're doing the PII. I'm only changing the name, so that's why that's there. But if I go down to submitted requests, and we'll look at that again, maybe. If I forget, that's why I told you now. Look at generators. Notice this one's not started. So we're going to be careful with our flow inside of our process in Nolio, because our action may think that the command is complete. When it's not, it's really in the process of actually just starting up. Okay, so do a couple of little refreshes. I'm going to mute a couple of times because I'm sipping coffee, and the other pet peeve I hate is hearing people gulp on a call. So give me a second. Okay. All right, so that was fast. It's done. It's complete. How much data do we have? And I didn't pause the video. I just took a sip of my coffee. First of all, let's get rid of this so we don't do it again. Okay, so we have some data. All right, now the next thing we want to do is probably mask that data, right? So that's going to be in our DBO. Sorry. And this is run. All right, so now we're running a masking job. So I could go up here. I think it picks up here. Nope, it doesn't. That's fine. Because technically it's a job that's running. I'm really surprised it doesn't pick up. That's okay. Tomato, tomato. So where is our database? So the one thing to notice is the names. Obviously, don't memorize them. But if I run this again, notice the names changed. If you didn't, rewind the video and look again. But the point is, that's done. So our next task is going to be, we want to set up our project. Now, when you run Python, best practice is to run it inside, have all of your references come down to this environment. Now, I already ran this once, so we don't have to wait for this, but Python is very good about having this virtual environment. I want to be careful how you say that, but that's what it stands for. And it puts all of its services into it, so you don't have to worry about installing stuff on your local machine. So let's just go ahead and run that. So you're creating a virtual environment. I already have it up there, so not a big deal. It would really create the folder and make it active, right? And then it's going to pip install the packages it needs. But for the most case, they were already installed. Now, the last step is going to be to run this. I probably should name these bat files better, but I wrote all these very fast. So deploy and run. Okay, so now that's running. If I click on here, sometimes double click and work, but hit or miss. What this is going to do is stand up our Python, which really is just retrieving our data out of the database. So, all right, so that's kind of what we want to automate this process. So let's go ahead and stop that. Now, the first thing we want to do is create a project. So an application, sorry. So I'm going to say new. I like using, I don't do this professionally, but when I'm showing demos or when I'm doing videos or training classes or whatever, I like to put the name of what the object is so it's easier to find. So what we'll call this is video, or you know what, call it training application. I don't like putting the word to up there, but I think I already have one called training application. That's why I want to be careful. You know what, let's put today's date. So 17, oops, my numlock wasn't on, 17 July. Okay, there we go. So that way I know that this is one for today. Now, save. Now, by default, whenever you create a project, Nolio is going to start tying some things together for you, but we're going to break those so you can see how it works. And that's what it does. So it automatically put my server types. It automatically gave me an architect, and it also gave me an environment already. So, but we're going to delete all that because we're going to do this ourselves, and we're going to talk about them as we do it. I don't think these are assigned. Yeah, they are. Okay, so I got to get rid of the default architect first, which I can't technically get rid of it until I get rid of the environment first. So let's go over to environment, make sure you're in the right project, and we're going to delete this one. Yes. And since I'm over here, we're going to just say website deploy. This is environment. Now you can have multiple environments. In fact, in most cases you would. Oh, we didn't set up an architect yet. I'm sorry. So let's go back to our architects. So let's just close that. We'll come back to it. Now we can delete this one. I'm sorry. Let's remove these. Yes. Yes. That's the mapping there. And then we'll delete this. Yes. Sorry, my daughter's sneezing. And now I can remove these. I could probably cut that out of the video, but I'll forget to go back and look. Now we can add our architects. So we'll call this deploy to dev, deploy site to dev. Well, let's not say to dev, right? Let's just say deploy site. And this is an architect. So there we go. The reason, what just happened? Let's refresh. Yeah, odd. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I created an application. Oops. So let's delete that. I was thinking about my daughter sneezing. Now go back to here, and now we have our architect here. Oh, wait. Sorry. There we go. Different project. So now we have our architect. Let's create a new architect. Sorry, I am so lost this morning. So create site. All right, let's call it deploy site architect. Okay, there we go. I clicked new application, not new architect. Now we need to map our server types, but we don't have any yet. Now, a server type has a couple of purposes. In theory, right, they are when you think of an application, you think of your 3-tier, right? 3-tier, 4-tier, multiple tier, whatever. Hopefully you're not doing a 2-tier anymore unless you're doing Windows commands, but Windows applications. But so in other words, I got my front end, my middle tier, and my data store, right, of some fashion. And you may have multiples. So you want to think of, that's why these are called servers, right? So for an example, we have a website. This website is going to be our server type. I hate using the word server twice, but this is our, let's call it web server. Server type. Okay. The minus sign is more of a programming practice. Python use underscores, but minuses are more for labels. So ignore my naming conventions and do whatever you do for yours. We'll do all this stuff here in a few minutes. So now let's create another one for data server type. So what that means is now I have a website and I have a data server. So we have our 2-tier in this situation. Now, from a physical point of view, these are really what agents are doing these. So now let's go over here and assign some agents and you'll see what I mean. So, see, now we got to create the environment. Okay, so let's go. I'm probably bouncing around too much and I apologize about that. But that's why this is a video. So we're going to say deploy site environment. Okay. And make sure we're in the right architect, which we're not. Oh, yeah, we are. Okay. We're in the right project. Okay. So now we have our environment. So now we can go and assign these agents to these environments. So we'll say, how come our server types didn't come over? So let's go make sure we got the mapping there correct, which we probably don't. We don't. Okay, so now we have our database. So we need to map this one to our deploy site. And here we're going to map this one to our deploy site. Okay, so what that does is this maps these server types. It's kind of odd that it's on the same screen because even though I created these, it wasn't really linked over here yet. And that's why they didn't show up in the environment. Okay, so we created an application. Application has architects. Architects have server types. Server types. Then you have environments, and this is where your stuff is going to be deployed. Okay, but before you do that, you got to make sure agents are assigned. Now, there's a couple ways of doing the agents. You can do an agent individual or you can do groups. Now, by default, I have the one group. We'll talk about that in a few seconds, but I'm going to do these individuals because what if I have, let me just put those on there, sorry. What if I have a set of agents, and you would, right? Because technically it's what I was saying. On a technical perspective, these server types are really what agents are going to be doing the work, okay? Now, let's say I have multiple agents. Instead of assigning all of those there, you technically could go into agent groups. Let's see, by default, I have this one, but let's just say, website server agents, okay? And we're going to add our agents in there. Now, again, I only have one, and then we'll go ahead and add another one. So new database, let's say data server agents. And again, I only have the one, but you kind of get how that works, right? So now I have a grouping. Now if I go back to environments, agent assignment, I can click on this one, I can remove this one, but what I can say is give me all groups, and there it is, right? So it's kind of the same thing, but you want to make sure, like if I change it in a group, it's going to give me all those agents, and then I just say select all and then assign. Okay, pretty straightforward. But either way, you are assigning agents to your agent, to your server types, which could be yours. I'm trying to be careful because a server type could be the type of a server, or you can just think of it of the process that's doing the job. Okay. So let's go. Now we're set up. So we're good. We have our application. Our application, I don't know what that shows me. I mean, there's a way to export and import. I just don't know if that shows everything I'm saying. It kind of does. It just doesn't put it in a nice, pretty way. So I was kind of hoping it would, but that's okay. You can export and import these, by the way. So that's usually the use case. Now, but here we don't have map components. So if we think about it, let's bring up another handy dandy notebook. We have an application. An application has an architect. Okay. I said architectural, it's okay. I started typing and just my fingers went crazy. That has server types. That has agents assigned to do the work. Okay, and then you have environments that server types do the deployment. Okay, so it's something similar to that process. Let's make sure I get that right. So when you think again, so we have architect here. When I go look at my environment, right? So the environment you're going to see come into play when we do a deployment. So let's take this out. There we go. Let's do it that way. So because it makes more sense when you actually create it. Now let's go back and talk about that one last thing. Now, inside the application, though, you have these map components. So what we talked about so far, I said so too many times, I'm sorry. But what we've talked about so far is setting up the architectural side of Nolio. Now, to me, there's three hats in Nolio. There's the person who sets up the application and makes sure all the agents and all that works. So it's kind of more of an admin type situation. And to me, that's more of an infrastructure because the admin themselves may not know the agents, right? And then the other piece that you have is you have the person who sets up this piece. So what I'm getting at is you have the administrator who comes in and sets the agents, right? That's infrastructure. Sorry, Roomba just cleaned this up and it threw me off guard. So that's the administrator piece. And then you have the person who comes in and actually sets up the application. Then you have the designer. Now, when you think of it as people-wise, to me, you have infrastructure, you have admin, developer, and then you have the release manager who comes into play when we talk about releases. So technically, I guess that's 4 personas. But here, what I did was I clicked on designer, process design, and now we're going to start building out our process. Now, I may cut the video here in a few minutes because I got a few meetings and then come back. But you know what? That's probably a good idea. What I may do is put this into a series to where you don't have to watch it 100 times. You can just watch the setup, and then we'll talk about how building it. Now, here, this is your default component. So what I told you is when you create an application, Nolio gives you a foundation of things you have to get started. Notice we have no server types. These are mapped to what's doing the work. And that's why I said it's kind of related to the environment, because when you publish it, it needs to know who's actually doing the work. So if I click on these, I see my 2 server types. But we're going to go crazy, and we're just going to delete this. There we go. Now we're going to create a new component. The one thing that I wish Nolio would do, but it's time versus effort, is just too much work for little reward, is name a lot of these folders to where they're consistent. So create a component really is just creating a folder. So deploy site components. Okay. So now we have these server components. Now I can go back over to my project. If you remember in the project, well, let me show you, application. Over here, I have these map components. Okay, now it knows, because that's the one that is in our project. You can have as many of these as you want. Okay, so you can create another set of components, another set of components. And that is very common. One of the downsides I see a lot of customers do is come in here and actually create or start using the default components. They don't rename it or change it. And that makes a living nightmare to come in and try to triage. So just because everything's in one bucket, but it doesn't mean everything has permissions, and it doesn't mean everything's using the same server agents. And now I got agents signed to things that don't need to be used for that server. So the point is, keep it clean as possible. Now I'll just do it from here because it's easy to see. So we're going to go ahead and sign both of these to this one. Now we'll separate it later. So my point is, you could have one set of components for your server types and one set of components for your database types. But we're going to keep it simple and just keep them both in there. Now what we're going to do is start setting up our flows. Again, this should be more of a, see when I say add new category, add component, and over here, I think this actually says add folder. Yeah, but technically they're all just folders. So inside of our actions, we're going to say new. We're going to think about our actions now. So let's add new category. We need database actions. And we actually want this to be a prep work. Okay. And now we need some actions for our batch scripts. Oops, I don't want to build an action yet. I'll stop the video and come back and do it. Again, I could put it long, but if you already, you may, I don't expect someone to sit there and watch an hour of this, right? I wouldn't even do that. Let me make sure I'm in the right spot though. Okay, so now let's go to new category. So batch script. Because we need to run our batch scripts. And then what we need to do is add another action for our file scripts. I call it folder because we're really doing folder scripts, not file scripts. And then I like to have one for miscellaneous stuff, kind of like cleanup type stuff, just something that doesn't fit in any of these. So if we think of our process, let's delete that one. So these are done by batch scripts. That's fine. What, are we missing anything? No. Okay. So I'm going to stop the video here. Then I'm going to start another one after my meetings, and we're going to start building more on this. So that way, this is the setup of your project. And truthfully, we're going to do the same thing for the flows. Let's just do that real quick so we're on the same page. So database flows. We're going to call this batch script flows folder. Oops, folder flows. And then we want one for our main deploy flows. So this one is going to go to our processes. Okay, so now we're going to stop the video. And then we're going to come back because I keep debating on there's parameters we're going to want to build. We want to add our actions. There's a lot more stuff we want to do to this. Excuse me. But from an admin's perspective, this is pretty well ready to go. And it's a good template. Maybe, I don't know. Like maybe use this as your foundation to moving forward. And you may not be running batch scripts or folders, but but you'll get what I'm talking about. And I will do another video for artifacts because that's very important. But there's some gotchas about the artifacts and using APIs.